Yes, we have a panel of about six, so we are going to make sure that we observe time, and I've asked my panelists to be brief, precise, and to the point so that we don't go around circles. So briefly, as you see the topic, we are going to address issues about regulations, because one thing that you are aware that in Africa we have been having issue about fragmented legal frameworks, which has actually caused pension funds not to grow the way we expect. And then we'll address issues of governance, because even for pension funds to invest in infrastructure, the main challenge they've had is lack of trust that have always been there by the trustees, whether they should be able to put their funds in private sector participation. I think when it's World Bank or IDB, maybe people are a bit willing to put their money, but when it's pure private sector, then you have issues when it comes to investing in partnership. And then we'll see how the consultants have actually participated. We have actually been organizing a meeting at OECD, at IOPS, whereby we had met a group of African pension supervisors in Germany. And we agreed, how do we create a class of investments for infrastructure? Okay, in Kenya, we have that class of about 10%. Other countries are also doing the same. But then that also will be addressed. Issues about innovation. Yes, I know we have had a number of innovation coming up in African countries, the D rates, the I rates, but the participation is still very low. Why are they not coming up to take this? Yet the innovation, the classes have already been created. So I'll go straight to the panelists and ask them specific questions and ask them to be very brief, and so that we can get time for you as participants to participate in the discussion. It's not the chairman's function. So the first question will go to Charles. The question is, a recommendation from the last Africa Investor Institutional Investment Summit in New York that you participated in was that investment consultants should be better supported and networked to generate proprietary Africa research and allocation solution to better serve the US pension fund clients. But before responding to that, your plan work with consultants tell us that your process and the types of mandates you follow on international investment program, and whether that includes Africa. Also share in your opinion what's required to ensure you and your boards of trustees get more comfortable with Africa exposure and risk, and the role the consultants and the types of mandates issues could play in the process. I think all of you will agree that the issues about financial literacy is coming up very, very seriously. And I've been a regulator for close to 16 years at Kenya Pension, that's RBA, Retirement Benefits Authority. And one thing that came out very clearly is that the trustees, as he says, they have reached a point that they don't trust almost even themselves, because they don't deal, the people they are dealing with, it's reached a point they don't trust the government, so that their money, they are not very sure it's being invested rightly. So what we've done, we actually came up with a training program whereby the trustees go through the training, and it's examinable. So you have to pass to become a trustee. Pass back is very low, it's only 70%. That's not very high. And all of them have to go through it to be qualified as a trustee, to be certified. The idea is they come to learn about the fiduciary responsibility that they have, because they have personal liabilities. And in fact, that's the time they actually realize they have a personal liability once they go for this training. And some of them wonder why they are trustees. And when we have forums like this one where trustees are supposed to be, maybe we have very few of you are trustees. And I think it's necessary, as they say, that they have to be trained, and we increase this financial literacy within the trustees and even within members, so that they can ask questions, they can ask the consultants questions. Right. And we are seeing that happening now. They're asking more questions than before. Because what used to happen before is what he said, what the consultant says, yes, right. The actuary has decided that's the right position. What the administrator has decided that's the right position. And the administrator, as he says, they're after their income, and they want to retain business. So they don't want to go. So whatever they say is being taken. But I think it's important that the trustees go through some of this training and understand their financial responsibility. One other issue was raised about the regulators. I've been a regulator for 16 years. We have been trying to bring regulators in Africa together through IOPS. I was the president of International Pension Supervisors. We've had meetings together to see how we can work together, look at the investment classes that we have. Do we need to have a prudent man policy, or do we need to put certain guidelines? What we went through was, because of the appetite for property and people making money through corruption, we are forced to put some limits that you can't put so much in assets. Because when you start putting up buildings, you can charge whatever you want for this building, so long as you put a few gold here and there. So it really doesn't matter. And because of that, we've seen a lot of wastage and mismanagement of funds. There is enough money in Africa to invest. We don't have to go borrowing money everywhere. So how can we now harness these funds and be able to use it? So I want to make this session very interactive so that all of you can ask questions to any specific panelist, and we can also answer when we can. Or any of you can answer. It doesn't have to come from. The chair doesn't have all that knowledge. These are the experts. And yourselves, actually, you have the answers. I always believe students know the answer. Only they ask the teacher to confirm. Yes, questions? Yes?
I have a question. My question is just on your last topic. You talked about trustees need to be qualified. How would you advise?
I can hear you. Yes.
The pension funds, for example, in Namibia, their trustees are elected by the employees. How would you encourage these pension funds to make sure that when the employees elect these trustees, they have the right skills, expertise in order to make the right decision?
As a regulator, I put in a provision requirement that all trustees need to be trained immediately 3 months after they join. So within 3 months, you must be trained. Yeah. Because once you are elected, you have a 3-month window to go for that training. And the training is compulsory. If you don't go for training, then you step down so that somebody else can be picked who is ready to go for the training. And it's a 5-day week. You do exam every day, and you have to, they cover all these topics which are necessary.
Illinois has a requirement that trustees go through training after they're elected, because, again, 10 of our 12 members are elected. But I can say that the training that's needed is really the training that our investment director and staff give them really almost on a monthly basis about what the investment opportunities and the investment landscape look like. The training they'll get, training is a compliance. You know, once training becomes a compliance issue, then people look for training that just complies with the law. So they'll go through an ethics training, but it's not really the training you need to make the decisions on investments that need to be made on a really a daily, monthly basis. And that training really has to come from the staff. I think historically they've looked to consultants for the training, but I see more and more effective is if the staff is an active participant in training of the trustees and really educating them, which is kind of ironic since our trustees are teachers, that we have to educate them in that regards. And I think another role of this trust and training, you know, we'll hit all the T's, I think, but in Illinois, you've got to keep in perspective that 2 of our last 4 governors are in prison. You know, 4 out of the last 6. So there's a lot of skepticism and lack of trust. And so you start doing things by formula. If you can't trust the people, then you start doing things by formula. You look at your asset allocation, you look at the percentages and things like that, and you don't really get to build the kind of relationships that allow you to make the good investment decisions. And so I think that's a challenge that we have.
It's not very good to have a structured one, not this just attendance, because sometimes you have normal training where people just go attend, sometimes they sleep half the time, and they end up with a certificate. Here, this is structured, and they have to make sure that it's a certification that they go through. And it's a program which we've done in collaboration with international organizations.
Can I just talk just for a second? So the Washington WSIB has it's a great question because it's a really important issue. Definitely. The configuration of our board is a combination of the same beneficiary representation that we've all described here. We also have 5 non-voting members on our board. And what these folks bring, these are experts within various disciplines that supplement the questioning and the understanding of the board during our meetings. So they're not necessarily voting, well, they can't vote, but what they're there to do is to provide different insight, ask insightful questions when there's people presenting to the board and supplement that. And as with as you've heard already, I think it's a real commitment to the education of folks. Even as there's turnover on the board, you get new people in. Right. We spend a lot of time in our executive team talking about education, finding the right speakers, bringing them in. So we make sure that our board operates on that strategic level, but we're constantly supplementing that with different speakers coming in. We have 2 scheduled offsites each year where we're bringing experts there. And so it's a constant process evolving depending on the configuration of the board at any time.
Yes, another question? Yes.
Yes, you talked about the rigor of having different asset class heads review opportunities and then decide through some process, whether voting or otherwise, to make those investments. And I hear a lot of staff talk about that, but how do they practically do that when there's such vast differences between long-only, fixed income, private equity, real estate? And does it tend to devolve into, trust me, I know what I'm doing and I'll trust you, you know what you're doing? How do you really encourage and maintain the rigor that you described?
I would say, the way to answer that would be, it really is at this outset, as I described, there's a strategic plan that's presented. And that's what our board really has to have a deep understanding of, is what is the goal here? What is the bigger picture that we're headed towards? And so as each investment asset class executes on that, it's really a joint responsibility going on between staff and the board to guide that process through. It's not, it ultimately culminates at the board, but there's so much communication around that and education of them and what these opportunities are. And it's that whole vetting process and that cycle, I think, that continues to do it. Of course, within the strategic framework that's been set up at the beginning of our period, and it continues over time.
Another question, please? I would like to take 1 or 2 more questions. Yes?
Thank you. I'm Anna-Marita Alton from Batseta Council of Retirement Funds. A comment and then a question for Charles. I just want to indicate that South Africa is catching up and taking a little bit further as far as education is concerned for trustees. We've established a professional body, so there's already professional designations for principal officers and professional development, continuous professional development plan of about 50 hours. I think in the last 2 years, about 818 hours have been spent on continuous professional development for the principal officers. There will also be a program for trustees in the first 6 weeks. But the question that I quickly have for Charles is the consultant model. You said that we need to change that. Maybe just a quick, what do you think those changes should entail? Because I do agree, we definitely need to look differently at how consultants behave in the industry.
I've been the executive director for 2 years, and I think the change that we've been putting in place is really developing our staff and expanding the trustees, get to know and develop a trusting relationship with staff. We've started primarily, I think, in the alternative markets with private equity and real estate, is where we find that staff can make a difference. We have to look at the limitations that the current model has. That question in Illinois, every manager selection we make has to be through an RFP. Okay, so we ask the consultants, are we getting the best managers? And the answer is, well, we're getting the best managers that respond to your RFP. They may not be the best managers, but they're the best ones that respond to your RFP. And then we ask them, well, who are the best managers? And we can't tell you that. Because it's not what we're here for. In addition to asking the consultants different questions, it's also finding independent sources of information. So I think our team is just recently contracted to get Bloomberg and as a source of independent information to verify the quality of the investment options that we have. We're looking at the things that we are finding that the consultants tend to I'm going to say manage to complexity rather than diversity. So we have an increasingly complex portfolio that doesn't seem to really address our risk issue. But again, our portfolio looks like every other portfolio that company advises to. You know, the tolerance for differences across the spectrum are fairly narrow. And so I think that to get out of that kind of hegemony of the consultant, you have to invest in staff, and that you have to have trustees that trust the staff. I think an earlier question has to do with the liquidity. Well, where do we have bottlenecks in trust? Well, we don't trust that our employers go make their contribution. Well, if you don't trust your employers go make your contribution, you have a different view of liquidity than if you trust that they do make their contributions. It's a difference between needing a 10% return versus a 5% return on the portfolio for us. And it gives you much different universe of investment opportunities if you have that trust. So I think that's some of the things that we're looking at in our consultants and how we're trying to change our model. Outside sources of information, develop staff.
Maybe have a parting word from each of you.
Yeah, so I really struggled with this issue of consultants when I got on the board, because I felt like, you know, that dynamic I was talking about earlier, you've got the trustees, you've got the staff and the consultants, and it felt like the consultants were so in lockstep with the staff that they were the rubber stamp for everything that came to us. So one of the things I did a year and a half ago when I was elected chair is I said, let's reevaluate our role with the consultants. So we actually went out and interviewed a bunch of different folks and asked that question and just said, how do you view your role? Are you an independent voice? We actually ended up hiring another consultant, different consultant. That being said, it's made a huge difference in a positive way. We even have the consultants sit with us at the board meetings in the queue, and it's very common if we're on the fence about a decision or need for clarification, we'll ask our consultants, you know, this is what the staff's recommending. How do you feel about this? And it's made a huge difference in altering the dynamic, making it more positive. But I think independent voice of the consultant to be able to make the best possible decision.
And that's one of the changes we've discussed. Instead of using consultant as staff, use the consultant more like your actuary or your external auditor.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Independent.
Rachel, anything?
So I would just say that the consultant reports to the board, and it's really going to be dependent on the personality of your board and your staff. Definitely. That there are some consultants who drive everything from the ideas through the process. And if you let them, they will take staff away, and staff is just holding on to implement. Then you have the other spectrum where you feel like the consultants aren't adding value because maybe they're rubber stamping.
Right.
But it comes down to the investment officers at a CIO level of directing. It's staff that sets the vision and direction per the board. And then the consultants just say, oh, you're kind of veering off the road. You might want to pay attention, or you know, you're not like other funds. And that's not to say that you have to be like other funds, but you need to know where you sit, because you are going to be benchmarked against other funds. So just know what your fund needs, know what your staff is like, and know that there's a plethora of consultants available, but you need to pick and choose if you want very aggressive consultants, very passive, and that you can pull the passive ones and they can just be the sounding board to your board.
Andrian?
I think I just make a quick comment around peer learning from other trustees at other funds. Belong to trustee associations, develop capacity by benchmarking informally or formally against your local peers, your international peers. You know, I helped drive a benchmarking exercise for the Government Employees Pension Fund of South Africa, and it was great to see where we were on par and where there was room for improvement. You know, we also belong to an informal, you know, club, if you like, of large asset owners, different continents. And, you know, we were able to meet together, you know, put our heads together around certain aspects where it's too difficult for one fund to take action. But if you have a number of funds with the same view, you've got support. And that doesn't mean, you know, allowing a consultant to set the tone.
Yeah, and then we can go.
And then maybe just one other thing real quickly. Your question's very timely. We actually had a board member of ours recently challenge that very, you know, rubber stamping concept. And so what we're going to do is actually bring back a case study to them which shows them where we've had disagreement between a consultant and our investment staff, so they can see that that robust and rigorous process is actually happening, because you do have that cycle of it's only the ones we all agree on that come before the board. Right. So just add that as a possibility.
So you realize the issues are very topical. Issues about governance and consultants and regulation are things that all of you need to pay attention to. And I believe most of you are going to be trustees. And I always say trustees, they have two terms. Either you concentrate and focus and learn about trusteeship, or you spend your first term there acquiring wealth. The second term you should spend in prison. That's what I tell politicians. Politicians should first term your term, second term you spend in prison. So let's give an appreciation to the panelists.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.